Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is December 8th, 2020, and this is our school committee meeting, and we start the meeting by reading our vision statement. The Ashland Public Schools cultivates the academic and social emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA-Cable TV, and our order of business this evening includes the call to order, opening procedures, agenda review and adoption. There will be time for public comment. There will be a superintendent's update, COVID-19, and the update and the vote on winter sports, Mr. Marks, Special Olympics Unified Champion School Grant, Ms. Silva, approval of new co-curricular position, Unified Sports Team and Teacher Coach Stipend, Student Activities Bank reconciliations July 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, Student Advisory Update, Warrant approvals, Mrs. Bates. The approval of minutes include minutes of November 6th, 2020, November 13th, 2020, November 18, 2020, November 20, 2020, and November 27th, 2020. We'll have acceptance of gifts and donations if there are any, committee reports of activities, assistant superintendent update if there is one, member updates, and then action items. And then we will move to enter into executive session. I'm going to make this motion now, so I only have to read it once, and then later we can second it and vote on it. But we'll move to enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions, all non-union personnel, or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. And 3, to conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Not to return into open session. This is regarding the Ashland Educators Association teacher contract, Ashland Nurses contract, Ashland Unit B Educational Support Personnel contract, and Ashland Secretary's contract. So I'll take a roll call of the school committee members and ask you to also say whether you approve of this order of business this evening. And I'll start with you, Mrs. Bates.
Here and yes.
Ms. Williams.
Here and yes.
Mr. Kendall.
Here and yes.
And I believe Mark Terry will be joining us a little bit later, so he is not here yet. And I will also let the public know, I see we have a lot of visitors this evening, more than we usually have. So if you are here to share a comment, this is the time in the meeting to do that. It's the only time for public comment is right now before the rest of the meeting starts. And each member, each person who would like to speak, please introduce yourself, and you will have 3 minutes to share with the committee whatever you'd like us to know. We won't be responding, but we will be listening to your feedback, and then you are welcome to stay with us and listen to the rest of the meeting. So having said that, I will ask if there's anybody here that would like to offer comment at this time. And if you would, you can unmute yourself and just let me know that you're here and you want to speak, or you can raise your hand.
I would like to speak.
And that I see Karen. Is that you? Karen, were you the person who just said that?
It looks like you muted yourself after saying it. I don't know if that was intentional.
We can't hear you.
Okay. No, okay, I'm back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thanks. Just
Okay,
introduce
Karen,
yourself.
and
Karen.
anybody else, I just want to get an idea for, and you don't have to decide right now. If when Karen's done, you just change your mind and you want to say something, that's fine too. So why don't we start with you, Karen? Just let us know who you are, first and last name, please, and share your comments with us.
Okay, my name is Karen Steinberg, and I have 2 kids in the system, a 8th grader and a 9th grader. And I just wanted to relay some thoughts to the committee about my concerns. I'm really hoping the kids can go back to school next week. My daughter is in cohort B, and she has had 2 in-person days now in the last few weeks, and it could be even longer, with the fact that they didn't have Thanksgiving week and and last week, and Christmas is gonna be a Thursday, Friday. So I just wanted to put that plug in that I really hope that they can go back to school, and they really need it. Both my kids are struggling. Lori, talk to you about this, and it's been really, really hard. And even the 2 days that they go, I know that it's not really what they're ideally wanting to do, but even the 2 days, it really does bridge the week. It breaks up the week. It really gives them something to look forward to, and just it makes a big difference in relation to a week that they're all home. So I know there's bigger factors at work than just the wishes of us, but I just wanted to put that plug in.
Thank you, Karen. We appreciate your input. Anybody else? Last call? Anybody? Okay, seeing none other, I will move it to Jim for an update, please.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself as well. I should have mentioned this before. I'd like to recommend that we move, if they want, the student advisory update first, just in case our students have, normally we would put them first, to see if they want to provide their update so they can either go do other schoolwork or hang out here. But typically we like to give them the option to go first if they want to do that.
Fine with me, and I'm sure the rest of the committee will be okay with that as well. So
Helen or someone, do you want to begin, or do you want to wait a couple hours before you speak, or do you want to do it now?
I think we can start now.
Okay.
Lauren, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Laura Marcy, and I'm a senior. In mid-November, we switched from term 1 to term 2, and normally this change wouldn't have a very big impact on the students because our schedules would stay the same. However, this year, when term 2 came around, students were put into 3 new classes and had to adjust to these completely new subjects. Also, due to Thanksgiving break and this recent switch to all online for 2 weeks, students in cohort B were only able to meet with their new teachers in person for 2 days and have been all online with their teachers since. Stuco had a virtual homecoming pep rally, which was a fun video where club officers and sports captains were able to share their information about their seasons or upcoming events, and students also were recorded playing various fun games at home. Leading up to the pep rally, students also participated in Spirit Week, where every day there was a different theme that students would dress accordingly to.
thank you, Lauren. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Claire Marcy, and I'm a senior. A few weeks ago on November 11th, the Make-A-Wish Club had an event called Walk for Wishes. Everyone who signed up to participate in this event committed to walking 5 miles and raising money for awareness. There were tons of participants, and they raised over $10,000 for this event, which is very crazy and exciting. The club is now able to grant their 6th wish. Also, the senior class is going to do a fun grade-wide gift swap called Secret Senior before the winter break. Anyone who participates will purchase or make a gift for their randomly assigned person and will be receiving a gift as well. Although it is not something sponsored by our class, it is something new and fun the senior class will get to enjoy, as many other events have been canceled this past year, and hopefully it will lift some spirits. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Helen. This year we have a couple of competitions going on at the high school. The first one is the Student Council Poster Contest. The theme is Hopes and Passions for 2021. And this is open to all members of the high school, not just the Student Council. And the winner is going to get some monetary prize, as well as their poster being published around the school and blown up and posted along the walls. We also have the yearbook committee doing a photo contest where students will get to share photos that represent what Ashland means to them. And the winner of that contest will win a free yearbook. Speaking of yearbook committee, we are also currently voting on our yearbook superlatives right now.
Thanks, Helen.
Hi, my name is Caroline Ellis, and I'm a senior. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of the many events and fundraisers that are planned for this month, including Student Council, which is doing a game show night next week, and how the class of 2024 is doing a categories event on the 22nd, and just how, as we move into these cooler months and COVID cases rise and things like that, that all the students have really appreciated, everyone putting in their best effort to have these events, even if they're virtual. And also, if winter sports are cleared, they will be starting up very soon, including basketball, which is scheduled to have their tryouts the first day that we get back to school on the 14th. And a lot of teams have been doing virtual captains practices to get in shape for the possibility of a season. And despite the unknown surrounding whether we'll be able to have seasons or not, I think a lot of the players have really enjoyed engaging with their teammates during these isolated times. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Sayed. Here. So I'm gonna present a oral presentation on the student survey results for term 1.
Yeah,
So
I'm having a
there
little
was
trouble hearing you. I don't know if
survey
everybody else is.
conducted recently, which took data from 283 students at AHS and
Can you guys all hear him?
No, and
is my audio
Zoom
clear?
doesn't even hear him enough to pin him when you're in that view, so.
We're having a little trouble hearing you. Up, you're muted.
All right, I'll join from my phone.
That's much better.
Yes.
All right.
Much better.
I'll do it this way. So, hi, my name is Rahim Sayed, and I'm a junior. So I'm going to share an oral presentation with you guys regarding the student survey results from term 1. So there was a survey conducted recently, which took data from 283 students at AHS and recorded the responses of their experiences in term 1 of the 2020 to 2021 school year. In the first chart, it was seen that about 94% of the recorded responses were from hybrid students, with about 6% of the responses from remote students, but at least 20% of each class was represented in the survey. The first question asked was, I feel challenged by my classes and like the options I have with hybrid, remote, synchronous, and asynchronous. Then the questions were asked with responses on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 gave a positive affirmation to the question and 1 gave a negative response. And the distribution of the data was shown in a bar chart. So for the first question, the data was skewed left, which means the students felt the current system provides an appropriate level of difficulty, and the current options of learning are adequate given the situation. The second question asked, I like this current schedule for the year, and a reduced number of classes is helping me to learn. And the data from this question was also skewed left, indicating the current rotation of 4 classes per term, with longer blocks is helping to alleviate stress and is a good way to learn. Remote and hybrid students were also asked how satisfied they were with the current format of learning. And there was an even bell curve in the bar chart, which was surprising, as one would expect most students to be dissatisfied given our current situation. But people felt pretty neutral about the format of learning. Students also indicated that they felt safe at school, with about 2/3 of students stating that they either felt safe or very safe in their in-person days. Regarding the logistics of learning, over 50% of students indicated that they spend 3 to 6 hours on learning during remote days, and 84% of students said they feel good about the amount of work they receive on these days. The bar graph that pertained to how connected students felt this year showed another bell curve, surprisingly, due to the efforts of STUCO and class officers to involve people through different online events like the virtual homecoming rally. And lastly, students also said that they can get help from their teachers, with about only 11% of students saying that they didn't feel they get enough help, which is really good for the current situation, as teachers already have a lot going on with finding new teaching methods, and they're working extra hard to make this year as educational as possible for all the students. So overall, the results show that term one was a success in Ashland High School.
Thanks, Rahim. That was really helpful and really good to hear. Anybody have any comments or questions?
No, that was great. Is that something that, Rahim, you could share with us, that data? I think that was interesting.
Paul, I'm going to share it out with all of you. We're going to, along with the comments, that we had a couple of questions where students could share their input on things that would we could do to better support them, or things that they wanted to change. So we're going to discuss it at Site Council next week, and then I will share it all out with all of you.
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate having that information. Anybody else? Okay, Jim. Now to you.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? I don't like wearing earphones, but I got a lot of people in the house working tonight as well. So let me, I want to put a framework around the conversation that Mr. Marks is about to have with athletics, but also to really explain where we are within our community in terms of the Ashland Public Schools, but as well as in the town of Ashland. And I have, Audrey LaCroix and Ed Berman here, as you know, who on every Friday helps us report out what's happening with COVID in the community, but also in the schools, and how we are tracking this information daily. And if not hourly, to be honest with you, because things are changing so quickly, even within our schools. And no more evidence is needed than having to switch to remote last week for the high school, but then also at the Pitaway School, and then over the weekend on Sunday for Ashland Middle School. And even in the past 24 to 48 hours, we've seen a tremendous increase in COVID cases, in the need to quarantine not only students, but our educators. And as of this afternoon, I like putting things in a frame of the data, and I believe that we've really worked hard at following the data and watching the data, and to see how it impacts the Ashland Public Schools. And in this committee, and myself and my admin team, and we've always taken a calculated approach as to looking at what we have in front of us and making the best decisions. So for instance, while we have 3 schools closed, meaning to in-person learning, I don't like the word closed, they're doing remote only learning, we still have 2 schools that are doing the hybrid model, right? Because we're looking at the specific data that relates to those schools and how it's impacting those schools. But what we're seeing is we've got currently, and the numbers are switching, they vary every single day, but approximately 170 students quarantined across the district right now. And just around 40 educators. And that means paraprofessionals as well as classroom teachers. And so these folks are waiting for tests. Some are considered close contacts of someone who may be positive within our community. Just in the past, I think 4 days, we've had 18 confirmed positives within our schools. And today alone, we've seen an increase. We've moved into situations where at the Warren School and the Mendez School in the past 2 days, where we've had to close specific rooms. They're isolated rooms in terms of where a COVID occurred. There's certainly evidence as of, I'm just getting more information as we are going online tonight, that we clearly believe now there's evidence of transmission from students to adults that has occurred within our schools. We don't know how many folks are walking within our schools that are asymptomatic, and where there could be spread. And there's great concern with regard to how we're going to continue on in the model we currently have with the hybrid. I think it's important that I state, and I do this every Friday, that these are really hard times and really hard decisions that need to be made. And every decision that we make or recommendation that is made is done so with tremendous amounts of thought. Many of them are very painful decisions. I know that I don't get any sleep. I know my team doesn't get any sleep. Audrey and Ed for sure get 0 sleep because of the work that they have to put in to ensure that if we're going to be open for in-person hybrid learning, or other than that, we want everybody back in our buildings, but is it safe? We've committed to making sure that our community is safe. Even today, the governor, as you know, rolled back his opening to another level where even gymnasium, like gyms, like private gyms or restaurants, limiting the folks that are going into these again, limiting recreational facility usage. There are lots of things that are happening within our community. The local rate of cases per 100,000 for Ashland has steadily been increasing, even though the Department of Ed has changed their standard, and that the Department of Public Health changed their standard for color coding, if you will, from the yellows and the reds. We have been creeping towards the red quite quickly in the past 3 weeks. I can say that I don't believe, and Ed and Audrey, please chime in, I do not believe we have even hit the tipping point of how Thanksgiving is impacting or has impacted our community. And we're just starting to see that within the schools. So as we think about what's next, and I want to preface this by saying we are thinking about what is next. And with the number of cases increasing, the middle school, for instance, we had to move to remote learning because we don't have enough personnel. We don't have to run our classrooms in person due to COVID. And that is quickly happening in all of our buildings because of close contacts, because of the need to test. And when we're testing students and faculty and staff, they have to be out of the building. They can't come in. And if you're a close contact, you're getting tested 5 to 7 days out, and you're still quarantined for those 14 days. And it's important to know that we are seeing this increase. I'm certainly leaning towards on Friday, looking at the school committee for guidance and recommendation on my part that we consider moving to a remote only through the remainder of the calendar year. And that's because we know for a fact that these cases are starting to impact the number of students who are in school, as well as the number of educators we have available. There are no substitutes to come into classrooms. And the challenge that I see before us is that how are we going to even consider athletics or other activities? We are not allowing any activities currently within our building. We've been thoughtful about keeping the social distancing. We've been thoughtful about, I hate the word social distancing. I apologize, physical distancing. I think when we look at the overall structure, we've worked really hard to stay in school as long as we have. I think we've been very clear. This board has voted that if we are remote only, that takes athletics off from the table as an option. And that is something that, I don't take lightly in terms of moving to a remote only learning. I know it's not great. To Steinberg's point earlier, I get it. I have my own kids who are remote. I see how hard it is. But every decision that we're trying to make is in the best interest of the entire Ashland Public School community, faculty, staff, and students, as well as we are a microcosm of what's happening within our community. right? And our community is really close to the red zone. If not, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at if we're in it this week, just in terms of the number of cases per 100,000. We've been around that 25 and almost a 5% positivity rate, which is incredibly high. You know, I just shudder to think if we don't, as a community, take action now, that we're going to be flip-flopping continuously in and out of remote to hybrid to remote. And that's not good either. We need to have a plan moving forward. We need to have the ability to look at what's ahead of us. And by, you know, my recommendation on Friday, it's giving us that opportunity to do that. I want to comment that we have well over 200 plus staff members, faculty and staff, who will be tested on Thursday. You know, we received a grant, a donation, to have all of our entire faculty and staff, 400 plus employees, the opportunity to be tested for COVID. Those results will be turned around within 72 hours. So hopefully by the weekend or Monday, we will know if we have faculty and staff in our buildings that are asymptomatic, right? That's what really we're going to be identifying. This, again, gives us an opportunity to plan. I think, you know, I certainly want, as part of my update on this, to take your questions as a committee, but I want Ed and, you know, Sergeant Berman and Ms. LaCroix to weigh in terms of how they're feeling, and because I speak with them every day, and I think it's really important that while I'm relaying medical information from our experts, I think it's more important to hear from them, because I'm not a medical expert, but I listen to them. They do all the right things, call into public health. So if that's okay, Ms. Stosti, if I allow them to have a minute to speak.
No, I really want to hear from them myself.
Okay. So, Ed,
Ed, you want to start?
Who's going first? Audrey?
Go ahead, Ed. School year, and it is their hope, of course, that this is an account that is not needed to be.
I hear somebody's background.
Can you hear me?
yeah, we got some. Could everyone else mute?
Socially,
Yeah,
mentally.
somebody who's not on mute, I'm hearing you here.
Maybe it was Ed.
I was going to say, it went away when Ed muted.
Yeah, so Audrey, maybe you just, if you have anything, we'll wait for Ed to come back.
That's a nice way to punt it to Audrey there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Excuse Ed.
Yeah.
I think we've done an awesome job and with all our guidelines. I think keeping us in school this long is, we couldn't have done it without all that we've put into place. The schools, I think, are safe. I think they're a good place to be. I think our kids need to be there. The last couple of weeks have been pretty rough. The cases are coming in fast and furious. They're coming in 6 or 8, student cases at a time. The amount of time it takes to contact trace them, to make the phone calls, to make the follow-up phone calls. That's all we do all day long. All the nursing staff does. They're doing an incredible job. They're working incredible hours. They're not complaining. It's overwhelming. And what I'm seeing when I'm talking, I don't know if Ed can agree to this, but I'm finding that more of the cases are symptomatic these days when I'm talking to them than asymptomatic. So that's something that's a little bit concerning to me. We're seeing it more so in the communities. If there's one in the household, they're all in the household coming down as positive. And like Jim said today, now we're starting to see our first case of in-school transmission, which is concerning as well. I don't know, Ed, do you want to chime in a little bit?
Ed, do you want to?
Yeah, so I lost my Zoom connection for a minute. So one of the other things, and I'm not 100% sure, I missed part of what Audrey said, but one of the other issues that we're definitely experiencing is people that we are putting in quarantine with very strict instructions we are seeing out in the community. And these people are potentially infectious. And that's been a real struggle for us. You know, that's creating part of our problem, because then 4 or 5 days later, these people are testing positive. So now we know they've been contagious out in the community. You know, I'll be honest, when this all started, after the initial surge in, in April, we were averaging, in a 7-day period, we may have been getting 10 or 11 new cases. We're now seeing 15 to 20 cases a day coming in, new confirmed cases. And Audrey and I and her team, our first, whenever a new case comes in, the first thing we're trying to find out is if there's kids in the district, so that we can stop them from coming to school. And if we didn't do that, we would have more kids coming to school. We're putting the brakes on it, because unfortunately people are still sending their kids to school when even there's somebody else sick in the household that hasn't been tested yet. And the piece, I think, medically, is if you are sick, you should just consider yourself positive until you're tested at this point.
Thanks, Ed.
So I think, like I said, these are really difficult conversations to have, right? But our obligation, and my obligation, is to make sure that our schools are safe, that we are following the guidelines, and we're certainly, as Ed said, and we're certainly finding opportunities within our community that people are not doing that. They're not adhering to the guidelines. This is why we have upwards of 150 to 170 students quarantined. This is what's happening. And it, to me, is, it's going to take a community-wide effort to adhere to these guidelines and to ensure that we can get our kids back in school. Nobody wants kids in school more than I do. That's the only place I think we can get really, and I would say that I think all the teachers want kids in schools. But what we don't want is, we don't want, adults and kids in schools that are putting us and others at health risk. And that is, that's the struggle that we face every single day. We are quickly getting to a point in our other schools, Warren and Mendez, where we will not have staff available to conduct classes there either. That's the reality. And we need to do something about that. And, when we start talking about, other activities within our schools, what are we, I think we have so many mixed messages within the national level, the local level, the state level, that says, oh, by the way, it's okay to have, don't have X amount of people in a restaurant, but go ahead and have, 30 kids in the classroom, or go ahead and have, this activity and that activity, but you can't have this activity that's occurring outside. It's incumbent upon us, I think, as a local organization, because the state level has not given us guidance. And our job, and my job, is to recommend what I think is the best approach after discussing with Ed and Audrey for our community. And like I said, I think as we move to Friday, I don't want this community to be unprepared for a recommendation that I see needed to happen, which is to put a brakes on our in-person hybrid learning for the time being, and until we get through this surge, and to see if we can even begin that after the break. Audrey and Ed, I know we've had that conversation. We're concerned about even after that break as to what learning would look like. So
We're still seeing Thanksgiving cases
right,
coming in.
yeah, I don't think we even hit the tipping point on the Thanksgiving yet. A lot of these cases that we're dealing with, we can't tie directly to Thanksgiving yet. But so you know, I want to open it for questions to the committee.
To that point, Audrey and Ed, are you seeing cases that you can confirm came from a Thanksgiving get together?
Absolutely, 100%.
And travel.
And I don't want people off the hook here. We've seen some gatherings with our high school kids, and we can track back to patient zero the transmissions there also.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Any questions for Ed or Audrey or Jim? Paul?
yeah, so I mean, just to piggyback on something Audrey said about the preparations and stuff like that. I mean, we talk about it on Fridays, but we obviously have a larger group here, but we wouldn't have been able to stay in person as long as we have without all the work that Audrey and Ed and their team has done. I mean, we can't have school with just these numbers unless they've done just an amazing amount of work to be able to say with any kind of confidence that they have completed contact tracing and they have quarantined the right people. And so, you know, to be honest, this whole conversation pisses me off because it's people being irresponsible. It's people being selfish, and not even just for the numbers, but you know, and I've said this on a Friday, right? When they do this, when they don't follow the rules and they don't do the right thing, they're not just taking their own risks. They're impacting, you know, Ed and Audrey, Amy, and everybody else that's doing that contact tracing. They're impacting their personal lives. They're not doing this just 9 to 5. That's not when this occurs, right? So, so thank you, Ed and Audrey, and that whole team for the work. Because nothing we put in place would have mattered if we didn't have them doing that work. So.
Can we just special shout out to Amy Childs because she's not on these calls, but she's helping so much, and I don't think she gets enough credit for the work she's doing.
And Isabel Perez too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the school nurses.
Yeah, that's why I just say you two and their teams, because I'll miss 5 people that are, you know, doing amazing work. So.
Anybody else with questions about that? So
I actually have one for Jim. I know you're talking about Friday, but is there anything that's going to change your mind between now and Friday?
With regard to being remote starting next week?
Because I mean, I think we've had this conversation before, right? I mean,
no, there isn't.
The challenge is, I think we have some confidence that we're going to struggle with our threshold of capacity for contact tracing and or staffing.
Sure.
And we just had a situation where at the 11th hour we had to go remote at a building, and that's very impactful to families, right? To say, hey, here's 5 o'clock on Sunday. By the way, your kid's home tomorrow. You know, so if
I don't, Paul, I mean, it's a good question. I don't see, I do not see my recommendation changing between now and Friday. And I agree. I think giving families and educators the opportunity to be prepared for this is the right thing to do. I mean, today alone, 16 cases. Is that right, Ed?
Correct.
16 cases that have to be, and again, they're not all school related, but they are community related. And we talk a lot about how that community is impacting. And I know Aaron has mentioned this often. You know, it's not just about the schools, but what's happening within the community, because it is a microcosm of what's happening in the schools. And for us, we need to be cognizant of that. And, you know, we have so many more tests coming back in the next 3 to 5 days from these quarantine students and educators that it's going to make, it will make next week quite impossible to continue in the hybrid model. It just will. I don't know if Ed or Audrey disagree with me, but if you do, you're welcome to speak up.
Well, I think Audrey was in her office, what, at 4:30 this morning, Audrey? I was in at 5. I mean, and it goes all night.
Right.
And there's no CARES Act or federal funding or anything we can apply for to help us out to add another body to help do the contact tracing?
So listen.
That's my one.
Yeah, Aaron, I mean, that's a great point. And we can't find people. We are still down 1.6 full-time nurses in the Ashland Public Schools. That, I mean, you know, that's the reality of it. We don't have, you know, when we're talking about opening schools and having in-person, we don't have staff. That's the issue. We don't have the capacity to watch and monitor kids when they're in classes and to teach them. So,
and you know, like I said, I would love a couple more people. The problem, and again, I'll take even volunteers at this point. The problem is Audrey and I can't stop what we're doing to train people on top of it.
Right.
Jim, if you're, you know, pretty sure that, it sounds like you're definitely sure that this is going to be your recommendation on Friday. And I think from what I'm hearing from Ed and Audrey, and from what I'm learning myself by just trying to read and listen and so forth, that this isn't getting better in the next few days, and we're probably going to see it get a little worse before it gets better. So is there any reason not to just settle it now so that we can then move into our next discussion, as well as making plans? I mean, what's the point of waiting till Friday?
There probably isn't. It's just been our typical protocol. That's all. I mean, there's nothing to, I mean, you know, I mean, Ed, Audrey, I mean, do you agree with that assessment at this point, that that's probably where we need to be going?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and so.
So my concern, the reason why I'm asking Jim, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate how difficult this has been for everybody, you, Jim, Ed, and Audrey, especially, and your teams, everybody that's working with you. But I'm only going to speak for myself, but when I make my decision on this, I'm listening to Ed and Audrey, and also Jim, the information that you're giving about who's out and how we can operate, or whether we can operate. And I just don't want this to turn into a big public opinion thing, where between now and Friday, you know, there's any, I'm not looking for that kind of input before I make my own decision on this. If everybody else is, then that's fine. We can wait till Friday, but I want to understand a little bit better about why we're waiting.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Laura, because there's two factors, right? Can we contact trace sufficiently so we know that the people coming into our buildings, that we've done the work to limit the risk there, and can we staff our buildings? It's not about input. It's about that information, at least from my perspective. And if I don't see anybody's input changing before Friday. So
yeah, I mean, if you guys are telling us you need a little bit more time to figure some things out, then I certainly am willing to give you that time. But I just don't want to give the impression that this is, you know, going to be a big we're going to be hearing from a lot of people with how they feel about it. And while I'm interested in people's input in general, I think we're in the middle of a crisis. And I'm hearing from you, Jim, and from Ed and Audrey, that we've reached a tipping point and we're responsible for everybody's safety. And so the sooner we can make a decision on what's the best way to go. And if you need more time, that's fine. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also don't want to unnecessarily cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of people who think that, you know, they may change the course of this by, you know, a big public onslaught of.
Yeah, I listen, I don't see it. I mean, we've got we're creeping up to 15% of our professional educators being out across the district. I mean, those are real numbers. And then the number of students who are out as well. It's, I don't know.
Are we even, so if we do go to full remote, do we even have enough staff to do the remote class then?
The answer is yes, because they're home already. They're quarantined, Kathy.
Okay,
They can't come to school.
Okay.
But they can certainly teach remotely.
You know, the other thing too, I just want to point out, you know, and if you look at the graphs that I produce that I send out, you know, in March and April, we knew our numbers were high in March and April. They're similar to what we are now, but they were 60 years of age and over. And now we're reaching those peaks with 35 and under. So
I noticed that, Ed, on the state dashboard. I mean, there are more cases in the child category than in my own age group.
Right.
Correct. Yep. So with the numbers are peaked just where they were in March and April, but the ages have completely flipped also since March and April.
So I guess my final comment before you make any decisions and before we get to Mr. Marks, who's been very patient and I appreciate it, is that, again, I want to go back to what I started by saying, I give this a tremendous amount of thought, and it eats me up and it eats my team up. We have these conversations daily, hourly, you know, whether we're making the right choice or not. We try to balance the need for our students' social emotional well-being, their opportunity to participate, whether it's in a theater production or an athletic event or student council in person or some other activity that provides them with some goodness to their soul. And whenever we're up against making those hard choices, we're not doing it lightly. We're doing it with lots of consideration. And for me, it's painful. You all know me. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and it hurts. It hurts to have to say that this is what is, I believe, the right thing to do for our kids today and for our community. It won't make people happy. I get it. But I know that we've given it a lot of thought, and you know, Audrey and Ed and I, we talk constantly about this and what's the right thing to do. And let's stay open as long as we can. And believe me, how many people thought we'd be having this conversation on December 8th? If you were looking at the numbers in the summer, it's because of what we've done that's given us this opportunity. So I will leave it at that. Off my soapbox.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm gonna, you know, with the decision we're most likely gonna make, I'm gonna have to go talk to 2 kids who are gonna want to throw stuff at me. So it's not, it sucks.
Well, I think I'm with you on if it's, you know, making a decision tonight as opposed to waiting a few more days. And we do week after week, multiple times during the week, we're listening to Ed and Audrey and, you know, the medical team. And I know you look at this daily, hourly, like you said, Jim. So if the team doesn't think it's safe and you don't think we can staff the schools, then yeah, maybe we need to decide tonight.
I'm okay with deciding tonight. I think, can't imagine any information getting better, seeing that the last week, just every day seems worse and worse and worse from a state, from a town, from our school system, from all aspects. I don't see that opening ourselves up necessarily for what Lori said is right, is onslaught, when we're trying to look at science and data, and just having to take an onslaught of probably some support, but probably a lot of abuse, and a lot of abuse that's not centered in science and centered in sports and politics. I think let's just make the decision and allow people 3 extra days to plan for it.
So Lori,
Mark just joined.
Yeah,
I saw that. Mark, did you want me to bring you up to speed on just where we're at?
Yeah,
right now?
with apologies to everybody, I had a work commitment that ran later than expected. So I apologize for missing out on the conversation, but if you don't mind, very briefly, Lori, just let me know.
Yeah, because I think your input would certainly be helpful here. We didn't even get to Stephen yet, and we will get there in a minute or two, hopefully. But you know, Jim shared with us what's going on in terms of how many people are quarantined, and that we are we're in the position of operating on a day-to-day and keeping it safe is no longer. He's going to make a recommendation. He was planning maybe on Friday to make that recommendation, that it was no longer possible to do that. And Audrey and Ed supported that from the health perspective and shared with us about where they're coming from. And so my question was, you know, and then there was some talk about, somebody asked the question whether Jim anticipated anything changing between now and Friday. He said that he did not. And so I suggested that I'm not really sure what would be the reason waiting until Friday to make the decision. I mean, we can wait until next week to start this, but in terms of making decisions so we can move forward and start to plan, you know, it would be my preference to take care of that now. And everybody else weighed in on that, and you just tuned in right when we were doing that. So
I'll be brief in my comments, and I guess I have the benefit of not having heard anybody else's, so unfiltered. And forgive me if I'm repeating what others have said. I did have the opportunity to talk with Mr. Adams earlier today at some length about his concerns, and the question I posed to him, and the thing that's really going to drive my thoughts is, you know, what are our medical professionals telling us about where we are right now and the risks? And I want to ask people to repeat it, but my understanding from talking to Jim is that both Ed and Audrey felt like we are at that point. And again, I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth, and please correct me if that's not correct. But if we are being told by our medical professionals that the element of spread, the risk of spread is significant enough now that we really can't be operating safely, I would agree that we should just make that decision, even if it's to be effective on Monday, and give people the time to make plans to transition. I'm sure staff would benefit from that, students probably as well. You know, right now we're only operating 2 school buildings as it is, I think. So, you know, I've thought much about it during the day. I don't see a reason to wait till Friday either. Better to make that decision and let people know that.
Jim, do you have anything else you want to say about that? Before I ask for a motion?
No, I mean, I don't. I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself by just saying I want folks who are listening and watching to understand these are not simple decisions. We take everything into consideration and conversations that we're having with people. And like I said, I mean, it's just the numbers themselves are eye-opening in the past 2 weeks to see what has happened to our schools in terms of the number of folks that are out. And I got principals here who could tell you they wake up every morning wondering if, you know, I bet Pete and Claudia right now wake up every morning and wait for the list to come out to see, do I have staff in my school today? And
I see what you're going through, Jim. And
that's a reality.
Yeah. And to be honest, you know, we, like you said, when we talked about it in the summertime, we weren't sure that we could make it past Halloween. And it's only thanks to all of you. I mean, I have members of my family that haven't stepped foot in a school one day this year. And, you know, and I think it's to all of your credit for working so hard to make it happen, but you can't help but notice what's going on all around us. And the it's getting closer, and obviously the numbers back that up. And with Ed and Audrey now sharing that, that's how they're feeling, I'm with you on that. And nothing has been taken lightly by anybody on this meeting. And we talk about it all the time. We think about it all the time. And we understand the burden that we have in making these decisions for everybody. But that's the role that we're in, and we're doing the best we can in trying to get the information from the people that can guide us. And that's why, I'm supporting you, Jim, on that. So I would be willing to make a decision tonight if somebody wants to make a motion.
I have one if you're surprised.
Not surprised.
I would move that we transition all schools in the district to remote only learning for the remainder of the 2020 calendar year, starting Monday, December 14th.
Do
Second.
you have a second on that? And then all in favor, Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Mr. Kendall?
Aye.
Mr. Terry?
Aye.
And aye for me as well. Thank you. And then obviously that will impact athletics, Stephen, but I think you should still make your presentation, because obviously this isn't going to go on forever. And at some point we hope, the goal is to get everybody back. And that's why I think these recommendations are being made, so that we can put a stop to some of this, so we can all get back safely and get back to sports and get back to school. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and present as you planned. And then I guess that the discussion will be whatever it will be, and then the timing will be whatever it will be.
Sure. Well, thank you, and I appreciate all the time and the thought that goes on into this. And I know that I've had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Adams and the district leadership team, so I do get a wide perspective on what's going on in the district, not just in athletics, and I'm fortunate in that sense that I can see that. So, but with that said, one of the things that I took from the conversation that we just had is that, despite whatever's going on, we should have a plan for. And what I can say is I am very confident that the plan that our league has put together and the plan that we are ready to execute when the timing is right has gone through a thorough process that I'm comfortable presenting to this committee, looking for approval when that timing is right. So I will go through my entire presentation, be glad to answer questions at the end. But, just to be realistic here, the timing. So if we are going to go back to school, potentially at the earliest, the beginning of January, athletics will still need, at least 10 days of practice for the team sports in order to even start competing, so that, just so everyone knows, the timeline gets moved back and the season gets significantly shorter. I met with my coaches at 5 o'clock today, and I told them at least my take on it is anything we can do to get the kids to play, if it's for a day, if it's for a game, if it's a week, I'm all for it, if that can happen. So I just want to be clear that the timeline doesn't mean that games would be able to start that first week of January. It moves things back about a week and a half to 2 weeks there. So I'll start off by saying that, and then I did write something, and then I'll get into my presentation. So thank you for the opportunity to present the plan for winter athletics tonight. Before I do so, I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to thank the high school administrative team, Superintendent Adams, and the school committee for their support, and the athletic department, event staff, parents, the Ashland COVID task force, the community at large, and most importantly, the coaches and student athletes for the very successful and recently completed Fall 1 season. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the high school nursing staff, Sergeant Ed Berman, our head nurse, Audrey LaCroix, as well as our amazing athletic trainer, Amy Mendoza, for helping keeping us safe and following protocol throughout the duration of the season. We should all be very proud of the work done on and off the fields this fall. I know I am. Now here we are gearing up for the winter season, and understanding that things are different as we move to some sports indoors, What has remained the same is a belief in a process, a plan, and a community that always puts safety in the forefront of every decision. The TVO athletic directors and principals have met numerous times, putting together and adjusting a plan that reflects the framework and guidelines coming directly from the state level. It is clear that this is a challenging time for all, as numbers in our country, state, and local community are rising, and the high school is currently in a fully remote learning model. It is also clear that following a thorough, multi-step process, that athletics can be run effectively and safely, giving students the opportunity to compete and get much needed exercise that benefits them both physically and sometimes more importantly, mentally. This plan is thorough, solid, has the ability to be adjusted as data dictates, and should strongly be considered for approval. With that said, I'll go right into my presentation and again, be happy to answer any questions at the end. See if I can figure out the share screen again. Okay. So first and foremost, I think it's important to understand that there was a long and thorough process and timeline that went into this. I was receiving a lot of emails and phone calls saying, what's the holdup? What are we waiting on? And this is really what we were waiting on. And I've highlighted a couple of things. First and foremost, the EEA releases their, youth and amateur, their sport guidelines. The most updated version that we got first came out November 6th, and then they updated again on November 11th. After that, the MIA sport committees met to establish modifications to the high-risk sports. At that point, I sent out a winter athletics update. We opened up winter registration. The sport committees presented to the MIA Sports Medicine Committee for approval. That happened on November 16th. Then the 17th, the sport modifications were approved by the Sports Medicine Committee. The 1-day delay is because the initial presentation was denied by the Sports Medicine Committee. They made the individual sport committees go back and make some adjustments to make it safer from their perspective. Then starting the 17th, the MIA COVID Task Force began to present to the MIA Board of Directors. The next highlighted one, on November 20th, the MIA Board of Directors voted and approved the COVID Task Force recommendations, which is what we now know as the potential winter sports season. Then the athletic directors met. We met with the principals. I sent another update. We were finalizing our plans all the way through even up to today. I had first closed registration on December 7th. We have extended that to December 12th because we're trying to get numbers so we can plan accordingly for whenever we do start sports. And then obviously the presentation tonight that was supposed to be tomorrow, but got moved to today. So again, the reason I have this in there is this is what was taking us so long to make sure that we had a thorough plan, and we were waiting on a lot of information from other places so we could make that plan. The EEA has continued to put different sports in risk categories. So for the winter sports, and there's a link there, and this will be posted, but the low risk sports for the winter season would be gymnastics and alpine ski. The moderate risk sports would be indoor track and swim and dive. And the higher risk sports would be basketball, ice hockey, wrestling, and cheer. On November 20th, when the MIA Board of Directors met and approved the COVID Task Force recommendations, those recommendations were as follows. The start date for the winter season was originally November 30th. That got moved to what we currently now know as December 14th. The end date to the winter season remained the same at February 21st for the MIA. However, the Tri-Valley League has decided to end the winter season on February 13th. And a lot of that is facility driven in terms of what's going to be available potentially over February vacation for facilities. The MIA is not going to have any sponsored tournaments this winter, just like they did not in the fall. And the approved sports for the winter are basketball, ice hockey, gymnastics, alpine ski, swim and dive. The MIA task force recommended and it was approved to move indoor track to the fall 2 season, and they moved wrestling and winter cheer to the spring. What sports Ashland plans on running? And these dates, of course, now will be modified once we figure out when and when we'll be in school and when we can potentially start the sports season. So we plan on offering boys basketball, girls basketball, alpine ski. Alpine ski is a co-op team, meaning we combine with students from Medfield. Ashland hosts that co-op. We currently have 2 Medfield students that are signed up to participate on the Ashland team. Boys ice hockey was approved. Girls ice hockey was approved. Girls ice hockey is a co-op that is hosted by Medway. It has students from Ashland, Holliston, and Millis. So that's a 4 community co-op team. Gymnastics is approved. That is another co-op with Medfield that's hosted by Medfield. Currently, we have 1 student athlete that had signed up for gymnastics to participate with Medfield. So one of the things that comes to my mind and probably some other people in here is if we're delaying the start here in Ashland, what's the impact on the schools that we are co-oping with or potentially co-oping with? So for instance, what does that mean for the girls hockey team if the 6 Ashland students are not there for an extended period of time or a brief time, or because it could impact other students from other districts being able to participate at all during this winter season. So I think we need some further discussion on co-ops. Again, the MIA move. Someone's mic, if you could please mute, would be great. Again, the MIA moved wrestling here in indoor track. One of the changes that we made here in Ashland is we unfortunately have to move swim and dive to the fall 2 season. We use Keefe Tech as our home pool, and because of Framingham's numbers and their facility, it is not available to us and is not going to be available to us in the foreseeable future. We attempted to secure other facilities and were unsuccessful. So we've moved that to the fall 2 season as well. Middle school sports, much like in the fall, unfortunately, as we discussed with the Tri-Valley League, it does not seem feasible and appropriate from my perspective to run middle school sports when myself and the athletic trainer cannot be at the middle school overseeing those activities. In the fall, that was consistent across the entire Tri-Valley League. I can say in the winter, that's almost unanimously consistent. There's one school that is contemplating running an intramural type program. They also have the ability, they're on one campus, so their middle school and high school are together. So there is the ability to oversee that. So my recommendation would be that there would be no basketball offered to the middle school, unfortunately, this winter. The winter season, the TVL is divided into 2 pods. If you remember from the fall 1 season, we decided that we would create 2 different pods based on geographical location. And that worked out great in the fall 1 season. And a lot of that was the recommendation at the time. We were worried about travel time and what transportation was going to look like and costs of transportation and things like that. As the season played out, it didn't necessarily make that much of a difference. So for the winter season, we decided that we would go back to the traditional TVL large and TVL small divisions. So Ashland would be in the TVL large, competing against Holliston, Hopkinton, Medfield, Norwood, and Westwood. Practice sessions. Practice sessions would, in our league, are going to follow the MIA rules, which basically mean each team needs to have at least 1 day off per week. That's a change from what was happening in the fall season. In the fall season, because of all of our games going Saturdays and Sundays, we decided that we would have 3 practice days during the week. As the TVL athletic directors and principals spoke, what became really apparent from the get-go was it was going to be really hard to be consistent across the entire Tri-Valley League in terms of what we could offer and facilities-wise and access to facilities and things like that. So while the league is saying, yes, we should follow the MIAA rules, we could, as a district, say that we would drop it down to the 3 practices per week and the 2 competitions. If we had to do that, I spoke with the basketball coaches and the ice hockey coaches who it affects the most, and we would propose basketball practice to be held on Sunday, Monday, and Thursday, and ice hockey practices on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. I'll get to why those days were chosen in a few minutes. Practice sessions would be limited to 2 hours at the absolute most. Speaking to my coaches today at 5 o'clock, it became apparent that especially in our gym, if we're able to have access to our gym and play, that 2-hour sessions for each of our 5 basketball teams gets us playing practicing very, very late into the night. So we would probably end up shortening those practice sessions. Coaches would have students in pods for drills and keep the same pods throughout the entire season. So that would be for any drill and any drill work within their practices. EEA still has a limit on the amount of players and coaches that can be on a playing surface. That's changed a little bit. The language has changed to the winter season. It's now 25 players rather than 25 people on a playing surface. So, you know, there might be up to 2 or 3 coaches plus 25 players on a playing surface, but that remains the same. If there's more than one group participating in an area, which we would not do in our gym, but they would have to be or the cohorts for drills, or if we had more than one group, need to be separated by at least 14 feet. So that's similar to what it was in the fall. Competitions and rosters, the Tri-Valley League has established that all games will follow the traditional winter schedules. This is why I suggested the practice dates or days for those respective teams. Basketball will compete on Tuesdays and Fridays. Ice hockey will compete on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And alpine ski is to be determined. I had written here typically Thursdays. However, we found out late last night that it looks like alpine ski races might be on Tuesdays, but that's all dependent on the ski ward being available to us. Much like in the fall, we will compete against the same school. This will be for basketball and ice hockey per week. So on a Tuesday, Friday, and Wednesday and Saturday, Ashland was competing against Hopkinton in basketball and ice hockey. All 4 of those contests would be against Hopkinton to limit exposure with other communities. Team roster size, basketball, the MIA has set the roster limit at 15 student athletes. Knowing, as our league spoke, knowing that the amount of students that can be on a practice floor at once would be, 25, that would be hard, especially come game time if each had 15. So couldn't warm up together, just wouldn't work. So we decided to go back to the original proposal from the Sports Medicine Committee that basketball would be limited to 12 players per roster. Ice hockey, the rosters moved from 22 to 20 for this season, and alpine ski is to be determined because it's based on what the mountain can hold. Spectators. Again, the Tri-Valley League tries to be as consistent as possible with all our districts. Again, we found that to be really challenging when we started to talk about the winter season. It was different when we were talking about outside because you're talking about fields and stadiums. Now you get into, gyms and sizes of gyms, which are, much different across the league. In the fall, if you remember, we started with no spectators, and then we moved to 2 home adult spectators. And to be honest, that went pretty well for the most part. To be honest, it was probably better. Our home spectators were great, but we found that, parents from other districts were trying to show up to watch games here. And I had the same reports from other places that some of our parents and families were trying to watch games away, but we all did the best that we could in the outdoor facilities. It's going to be more challenging again in the winter to be consistent. For instance, there are some gyms within the Tri-Valley League that, given the current mandates for space between the bench and any fans, or the court and any bench, would not be able to have any spectators. Our gym here at the high school is large enough for both. However, I would recommend that we start off with no spectators, no home spectators, unless our numbers drastically change. That also allows the student athletes to be more spread out in the gym. again, because it's not consistent, some schools that have larger facilities or in different, maybe their numbers aren't as high, they may end up having home spectators. So if the season were to start, you know, if it had started next week and we started games in a few weeks, we potentially would have seen, our kids would have seen some spectators at maybe some away games, but not at our home games. So my recommendation would be that we start with no spectators. And I know that may not be a popular decision, but one that I think is needed in order to protect the student athlete's ability to potentially participate if we're just doing what's best for them. The individual sport modifications, this is what went through that 3-step process. The individual sport committees from the MIA meeting, presenting their modifications to the sports medicine committee, and then being voted on by the board of directors. This is what allows those higher risk sports the ability to still participate. So when I talk about earlier that one of the things that makes me confident and comfortable with this presentation is that these are not things that I or we as the Tri-Valley League have put together and think are safe. These are things that have gone through a very, very thorough process within the state for the modifications to be passed to allow those activities a chance to compete. There are links to the individual sport modifications that you're welcome to click on. I don't think we need to go through all those right now, but that is something that that is available to everybody, and that's how it got passed through. The coaching out of season, this slide stayed exactly the same from the fall. For those of you who remember or don't know, typically there's the MIA has a rule that there is no out of season coaching. The MIA end up waiving that rule for the year and put that rule on the principals, which I wasn't thrilled with. And I know our principals, I think that was a hard thing for them to have to vote on and decide that coming from the state. But it was unanimously voted that we would keep that rule in place, meaning that there is no out of season coaching going on this school year. Transportation, our goal is to continue, if we can play, to offer transportation for all of our athletic contests. We would continue to follow all the same guidelines that the school uses in terms of transportation to and from school. Ice hockey is something that I think we need to talk about if we're able to compete in that, in terms of, you know, what we can do. Typically they drive themselves to home games, but what can we do in terms of transporting them there that is safe and also allows them to change into their gear appropriately, whether that's in their own cars or their parents' cars or in a bus situation. So we need to talk about that further. Event day management, we'll have daily screenings by the coaches. Any team arriving to Ashland High School or Loring Arena where we play ice hockey should come dressed and ready to play. Locker rooms will not be available for any teams. There will be bathroom available at both facilities, maximum of 2 people in the bathrooms at a time. All visiting team coaches will provide an accurate roster of team members, including contact information if we need to do any contact tracing. Hand sanitizer and hand washing must take place if utilizing the bathrooms. We will have a custodian on duty to help with cleaning and disinfecting. All areas around team benches and scorers table will be sanitized between events. We'll have hand sanitizer available. We'll have disinfectant wipes available to sanitize the equipment and balls throughout the contest. Our athletic trainer, Amy Mendoza, will be available and there at all of athletic contests, as will I. All of our coaches and event staff will wear face coverings at all times. All team members must wear face coverings at all times, with the exception of what is allowed by the EEA and MIAA. That has since changed. Now they're saying face covers must be worn at all times. Doesn't change much other than that's just a newer guideline from them. The bench areas and team members must remain socially distant at all times, and everyone needs to bring their own water bottles labeled in order to use. I will say that myself and the Holliston athletic director made a visit over to Loring Arena, where we both have our home ice, to try and find out what does that look like. It's easy for me to go into our gym and map it out what it looks like, what a game or a practice will look like here. But we went over and did a site visit there and talked with them about, what would work over there to keep our student athletes safe, both during a practice and a game. And we were able to figure out, and most of that was around the bench areas, because we can no longer squeeze, 15 kids into a small bench at the ice hockey venue. So on to practice day management. Again, we were daily screenings by coaches. Locker rooms will not be open. Bathrooms will be available. If you're on a remote learning day, just like in the fall, students should arrive no earlier than 5 minutes before your scheduled practice time and ready to play. The school building will not be available for waiting time before or after practice, so people would need to plan accordingly. So for instance, in the fall, we were able to get most practices in right after school in one practice session. If you think about a winter season with all the basketball teams, we would have to stagger them and they would go later. So the school building would not be available at this time for people to wait around. So we'd have to figure out, people would either have to go home or find something, find somewhere to be that's safe and then get back to the building for that, for their practices. Again, everyone brings their own water bottle, much of the same stuff from the game. The benches will be, cleaned between events and drills. We'll have disinfectant wipes. Our athletic trainer and myself will be at every single basketball practice section. Coaches will wear face coverings. And if anyone is not actively involved in a drill or a teaching session, team members must remain socially distant at all times. The athletic training room, this is going to move back into the high school. In the fall, it was, we moved Amy Mendoza up into our actual concession stand, create a satellite office. The athletic training room will be back here in the high school outside the gym. We'll say before entering the athletic training room, everyone must wash their hands and use hand sanitizer. There's a 3-person limit in the athletic training room at all times, and anyone must have face coverings. Another thing is, if you did not attend school or a remote session, you're required to stay at home. There was some confusion on that in the fall season. So for instance, if you were scheduled to be in school Monday or Tuesday and decided that you were going to stay home or weren't feeling, for whatever reason, we're staying home, but we're going to log on remotely, you still must stay home. You would not be able to come in and practice or participate in a game that day. And Amy Mendoza, our trainer, will help coordinate that with us. Amy will be in constant contact with the nursing staff, with Ed and Audrey and myself, and that communication, I can't thank them enough for answering our questions. Sometimes, as Ed knows, some of my questions come around 5 a.m. and he's already working. So I appreciate that, and that would continue. So that is our plan. Again, I will say that I'm confident in this plan. I'm confident in the group of athletic directors and principals that have gone through this and looked at it and continued to adjust it and can continue to adjust it as data potentially dictates. I am looking forward to a more concrete timeline of when we think we could potentially implement this. And I'm happy to answer any questions, comments, and go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I will open it up for questions, although I think you've left no stone unturned. You put a tremendous amount of work into this, and we really appreciate all that you're doing to try to make this possible for the kids. I will now open it up to the committee to ask their questions, and we'll take it from there. Who's got questions, comments?
I'll have a couple. So Stephen, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for all the work you put into that. And the fall season and throughout, you've been on top of things, and there's not been a time where we weren't all in agreement, and you were always putting things in the right priority. And so we appreciate that. I really wish we were talking about this as, hey, can we do this right now? I really wish we were doing that. One question, we've already had a little bit of this conversation on Friday, so I won't rehash some of that, especially seeing as though things might change over the next month But you know, we've delayed at least in-person learning through this calendar year. But if it has to go beyond that, say a couple weeks, because as you know, we're still probably haven't hit the peak of the impact from Thanksgiving, and probably going to happen the same way, I would imagine, with you know, the other breaks and holidays. So can you just talk a little bit about the difference that it might be from the beginning of January to, say, the middle of January, starting if we were starting in-person learning a little later?
Yeah, certainly. If we were to start right at the beginning of January and then had our, necessary practice sessions before being able to compete, without looking at a calendar right now, I'd say we'd probably be able to compete in about 3 weeks worth of games and competitions. If we go out, we're looking at, another week or so, we're looking at 1.5 or 2. So if we got to the middle of January, we'd be looking at probably 4 of the 10 competitions for basketball and ice hockey being able to still be played. Alpine ski is a whole nother conversation because their season will end earlier. So, I don't know how much we'd be able to get done there. Maybe 1 practice and 1 race. But again, I am I am 100% on board that anything we can get these kids to do, that we should do. participated in it. Us as a Tri-Valley League, we decided to move it because everything was so new. We didn't know what, like at that point, we were just trying to get in school. That was our main, still remains our main focus. But we just thought at that time to even attempt an indoor sport before we knew what getting, I mean, there would have been practices potentially before we had students in the building, right? So we decided that it would be best for our league to move that season to the fall 2 season. So that's why it moved there. The question of, okay, well, basketball versus volleyball and what that looks like. I mean, the modifications are what the modifications are. And that's why I say the process, I'm confident in the process that the MIAA sport committees and sports medicine committee and the board of directors went through to deem these activities safe for this conversation, right? They're leaving it up to districts, but safe to have this conversation. So that was the difference. We moved that one as a league.
I appreciate that. That's helpful to understand that. And the only other point I guess I'd raise in terms of the presentation is the issue of spectators. I certainly agree with your view that we should be starting without spectators, but I am concerned that other schools are going to be allowing home spectators. I mean, it feels to me that the more people you put in a room, in a gym, or any facility, the greater the risk. And it feels a bit like, without knowing the facilities, the size, which I think could be a relevant factor, what other communities that we compete against, pick Hopkinton just as an example, if they were to allow spectators, even if it's just 2, that potentially does increase the risk to our students who are there as well. And again, I don't know that we're going to come to a conclusion on this, but I guess I'd be interested in, whether you feel like you can have some conversations with the other ADs about that if we're ultimately participating. Because it feels like if we're trying to limit risk, it doesn't matter who's in that room, whether they're from Ashland or from the other community, Hopkinton in my example, the risk is still the same.
Yeah, certainly. And Mark, we've had those conversations. And like I said, from the beginning of the talk of the winter season, what became very apparent was that it was going to be really challenging, if not impossible, for this to be uniform across the Tri-Valley League as much as we wanted it to be. And spectators was one of the issues or scenarios that came up where it just wasn't unanimous across the board. And ultimately we felt, and Ms. St. Clair, please, from the principal's perspective, my understanding of the conversation was, okay, if we can't come to an overall agreement, then it kind of has to be a district by district decision, and I guess, we could say if we're not comfortable playing that game, if there are spectators, that would be a conversation between the athletic directors and saying, if we want to play this game, maybe there are no spectators, but that's, we're now potentially changing policies of other districts, which gets a little like, yep. Is that, Ms. Sinker, is that correct from the principal's level as well? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
I think the discussion was some facilities didn't even have the option to have them, and some were going to insist that they did have them, and others were in the middle. So we did have to leave it as every district making their own decision there.
Certainly, given where we are right now, I don't know that it makes sense for you to be, for me to be pushing you to make a further issue of it. And I appreciate the efforts you've made thus far. Obviously, if we ultimately reach a resolution on moving forward with athletics, when we get back to in-person learning of some kind, we can have further conversation about that issue.
Other questions or comments?
I have just a couple questions. If we do, eventually approve of a season, a winter sports season, with the basketball, Stephen, in the gym, like, are the windows gonna be open to, have airflow going through there? I guess I'm just wondering how practice and games would go. And
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one of the things that's written into the modifications is, work with the airflow as best as possible. We're fortunate here at the high school where, we do have access to doors that go directly outside. So we can get more airflow than other gyms, even within our district here at the high school. So yeah, there would be modifications to what that looks like to get the best airflow. I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist and know what that is. So I would work with our facilities crew and find out what that would look like and feel like to make it as safe as possible.
Anybody else?
I guess I'll just add, like, Stephen, you did a very, very thorough job on this, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all the thought going into it. And I think most people here know I was a student athlete. I still feel like an athlete, and I really do feel for these kids, especially the kids where this is their last season. And which is why I think on the Friday call last week, I was asking about, especially, girls ice hockey. And but I'll be honest with the committee and the public, the basketball and hockey scare me because of the proximity of the sport being played, how close you get in somebody's face, how hard you're breathing. And what we know about the behavior and so, and not just the on ice behavior, but some of the off ice behavior that's led to outbreaks. I mean, it worries me. And so in a way, I'm a bit relieved that we're pausing now until this, like, we have some time now that we're going to be remote for the school. We have some more time to think about this and plan. But it is incredibly, and I know how much sports means to people, but education and health come first. And so that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think anybody, coaches, athletes, parents, I don't think anyone would think anything different about that last statement that you said. The one thing I will say about hockey is, look, there are cases that pop up everywhere, and there are clusters that pop up everywhere. And yes, there have been cases within hockey teams and that have affected our district. But I'll also say that it's what kind of, the media kind of took a hold of that, and hockey has been reported more than some of the other ones. And that could be other sports or even other activities. So hockey's kind of taken a PR hit in that sense. And I'm not downplaying that there's risk. I think there's risk involved in anything that we do that's not a Zoom conversation right here, right? But I do think that hockey has gotten a bad rap for that. So I think that's worth noting. The other thing, and I know we're going to push this decision down the road, and I appreciate that. I think given the circumstances, it's the right and responsible thing for us to do as a community. But I will push that we do need to have a conversation and some answers about co-op teams, because this affects much more than just the Ashland athletes. And pushing things down the road, like I said, most notably for the girls ice hockey program, because if something were to change, or we were to say as a district that, okay, we're comfortable with co-oping because we have confidence in the coach and the guidelines that are going to be followed. And I can say that I do have complete confidence in the coaches, and especially the girls ice hockey coach that I know well from Medway, that everything will be followed. But that if we push that down the line is okay for us, but now all of a sudden there could be 6 or 7 Medway students and 6 or 7 Holliston students and 1 Millis student, and they may not be able to have a team. Whereas if we make a decision, yay or nay, they can start to plan accordingly. So that's the one thing that I would say I think needs a little bit more attention, and potentially even a vote tonight, so we can get those answers to people.
And Stephen, if it's okay to respond to that, I mean, I totally understand that, but where the Ashland school committee, right? So we have to do things relative to our numbers and our data. And so while it sucks that what decisions we make impact students that aren't even in our district, right? I don't know how we could approach it any other way. And if you're asking me if we have to make a decision tonight, then I'm pretty sure I know what the decision is going to be, right? I know I'll tell you what my decision is. We can't say yes to anything today, right? So, I mean, we only have one choice. So to me, that would be, if it was me you're asking, it's either punt it or say no. I don't know how we say yes to something if we're not saying yes to the other things. But I totally understand that sucks for other people. But if a no is better, it still stinks for, our young ladies who want to play. And if we're beginning of January, would otherwise be able to play, but we have to make a decision tonight, that sucks. And I don't want that situation either. Right.
Yeah,
So
I think, and I agree, Paul, and I do think the reality is and it's just, look, it's the situation we're in. If I report back to the other schools that, hey, we're going to be going remote until January, at least the first week of January, and we don't know what's going on then, there's a possibility, and this is, again, each district has to do what they do. They could say, then we need to now move in another direction, and we have 5 families and 6 student athletes that will not be able to potentially participate in girls ice hockey here for the school. So, I mean, I'm being pushed by the other districts. So I owe it to them to bring it up to this group and have this conversation. But I totally understand what you're saying.
I'll just jump in and say, the way I look at it is we made a decision as a committee the last time, like when we first talked about athletics earlier in the fall, that if we were fully remote, then athletics would not be occurring when we're fully remote. And from my perspective, nothing's changed on that. If one of my colleagues wants to make the motion to change that, I guess I'd tell them I'm probably not going to be in favor of it. But I look at this as, and we've said it many times, the academics comes first. As much as I believe in the value of athletics, we basically are being asked to, and I'm not saying you're pushing us to make this decision, but if we were to support co-ops, we're basically saying, it's okay for this, but not for everything else. And that's not the way I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about this. We have an athletic program. We made a decision that we wouldn't run athletics if we can't have kids in the school building. And I don't see a reason for deviating from that. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, as it relates to athletics for a lot of kids, right, not all, there are a lot of kids that are probably playing on multiple teams, and they may not be able to play for Ashland, but they may be able to be playing for their club team or what have you. And whatever the rules are around that, that's not something we can control. But like Paul, if you're asking for a decision tonight on anything, my view is, if we're remote, there's no athletics.
Yeah, and I agree completely with that. And I how do I say this? I'm not necessarily asking to allow them a co-op to start December 14th. I guess where I was going is, is there a way we can come to a conclusion whether if we start January 4th or 15th, is our district going to be okay with moving forward with a co-op having kids being on a team with kids from other districts, or not? If we are, right, whenever we are back in school, if that's going to be a possibility, then we could report back to the other districts and they could make that decision. They could say, okay, we can wait, or they can say, okay, we need to move forward and figure out to make sure that we have a season. So if I misspoke or made it seem like I wanted to start co-op sports December 14th and wait for everything else, I am 100% on board. If we're remote, nobody's doing anything. I agree completely. So
it's just that we need to give them a heads up, because they could potentially go find other towns to co-op with in replacement for us, but it also gives these girls a heads up to potentially join clubs that might not be closed at this point.
So Stephen, question, just to clarify what it is. Are you asking whether we would be treating co-ops differently than the others?
Correct.
I mean, that might be something we can discuss tonight, I would imagine. The other thing I was going to suggest is we will meet again in 2 days, and this might be something that, ask to go to the other schools, because, the particular ones that are impacted by these co-ops, and ask them which way we proceed, how that impacts them and what their preference is, right? I don't want to be pushed into saying no or something tonight, and then they're like, well, if you punted, I would have rather said that because they don't have something lined up, or, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, we're going to be discussing this. We're going to be meeting on Friday morning anyway. And we can either say tonight, it'll be in alignment with our other decisions, and maybe we're all comfortable saying that, I don't know. But we could also then just take it up on Friday if you can get more information and get some more idea of how they think our decision impacts them.
Well, I mean, I know how our decision impacts them. If our girls do not play, there's not enough to have a team for that co-op. And they're practicing unless anything's changed on Medway's front. And maybe Mr. Adams or Ms. St. Kern know anything different, but they are planning on starting that practice on Monday, on the 14th. So if we don't tell them till Friday, which we can do, because I'll tell you also, Holliston's part of that co-op and they're not meeting until Thursday. We're giving them a day or two to try and figure out their season. And again, I do understand we need to do what's best for us. I'm advocating for like what you said before, or I think it was Aaron said, so the other schools have an ability to plan and our kids have an ability to plan knowing what they can do. So I'm just talking about co-ops, whether or not we think that's something we can support here in Ashland.
I think, it's complicated by the fact that even if we, in a couple of days, are able to come to a conclusion on whether we're comfortable with co-ops, and, for me, co-ops aren't necessarily the issue. I'm more concerned about, whether we get to January 4th, and I'm not feeling confident that a whole lot is going to be better than it is right now for anybody in any sport. I hope it is, and if it is, I'd be willing to, pivot, but we're going to be coming right off of Christmas. We're going to be coming right off of New Year's. And I think it's more likely that we'll be having a discussion about whether we can, how long we have to continue this pause. So I don't know that there's any moment in time that we can come to a decision that says, yes, as of, this date, we're okay with co-ops, and that everybody should just wait patiently for us because we're going to be there when you're ready. Because I don't think any of us can really say that right now, even if we have no problem with co-ops. That's my concern.
Yeah.
And I would say, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
No, you got it, Mark.
As I agree with Lori's thinking a lot. I mean, I feel like, I think about co-ops and is there maybe some additional risk because you have some of our students commingling with, students from another town or two towns? Yeah, maybe. But we're talking about a relatively small number, right? I mean, I think the girls hockey team has got 5 families, 6 students participating. It's a small enough number that my immediate reaction, absent something unusual going on with another one of those communities where they're participating in athletics, but the positivity rate is 50% or something like that. I don't see the concept of a co-op being something that I would inherently think of as being treated differently than one of the sports that we do ourselves, like basketball, if that helps. But I really do agree with Lori that I think the chances of us being back in on the first week of January or the second week of January, or really at any time that's going to be meaningful for any of these sports teams, is pretty small. And, so I guess the most I'm comfortable saying is to Paul's question of, is the question really about do we see co-ops differently than we see our own? I would say I don't, not based on what I see now. I probably, if we got to a point of really making a vote on that, would look for, input from our medical leaders here and Ed and Audrey to see if they have any different thoughts on it. Cause that's the thing that's driving my thought processes is what's safety. And I don't see any inherent difference in that arrangement than just ours, or it's one that you can't quantify all that well. But that's where I'd come out. So if you ask right now and you want a decision, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Lori, can I just jump in just for a second?
Sure.
I want to just certainly go on the record as well as saying I certainly would support the co-ops that we have. I feel very comfortable with the conversations I've had with the superintendents of these schools where we're the teams that we co-op with and feel really, really good with regard to their process and their protocols. And they understand how we feel in Ashland and the things that we're asking our students and student athletes to adhere to. And certainly I've had, I think about Medway, Armin Pyers and I have conversations every day. And I do feel comfortable with that. I think it's important to reiterate, I mean, we are in remote through the 4th. And that's why, I think, Stephen, thank you for clarifying the point about the co-ops. I think that was critically important because I think initially it was, if you're asking for us to approve co-op teams, it would have been a hard no right now, right? As opposed to saying, are we okay with the concept of co-ops? And I certainly can get behind, because I know the individuals, we're going back 11 years. I was part of the first one to start the Medway Ashland hockey team, girls hockey team. I get what they're doing over there, and I certainly can support the people who are involved with that. So,
sure, thank you. So, I mean, and thank you, and sorry that conversation went on so long, but I do think it's an important one, even though it doesn't affect all that many students, but just as important to them as it is to everybody else. So I will relay that message to the other schools that this is where we are. We're open to the ideas of co-op, but the reality is, as long as we're remote, we will not be playing, and each district's going to have to make the decision that's best for them. If they can wait, they'll wait. If not, they'll have to do something else. So thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Adams, sorry, I would say that even when we return, whether it's the 4th or the 11th or what have you in January, that just a return to hybrid is not a guarantee to athletics, right? Based on what you and Ed and Audrey share with us about what's going on.
No, I think it would be a conversation, Aaron, but the only hard stop that we know is, and Mr. Terry mentioned this, right, is that we voted back in the fall that if we are in a remote model, we're going that way because of health, concerns, right? And that's the only hard stop for sure.
I just think for expectation setting that.
Well, sure, but I think we want to make sure that we're clear that that conversation will occur.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah, we'll be looking to have that conversation. Essentially, I think the consensus sounds like is we're treating co-ops the same as
absolutely
all athletes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Ed Berman, are you still here?
He's on my screen.
Okay.
Yes.
Here he comes back.
He's trying to take a
Well, we
nap.
haven't heard from you since the beginning of the meeting, so I'm just wondering if you have anything that you can add to the athletic discussion, safety, what you're
aside from your coaching record, anyway. Right?
Yeah, right.
He's undefeated.
Again, I think we need, at that point, we need to really look at the numbers. And I think we also need to see what's happening around us too with the other towns that we play against. I think that's the best way to do it. Kind of wait and take a look and see.
Okay, so I mean, we'll be revisiting parts of this. We're still continuing with our Friday meetings for sure, as well as our regular meetings while we're in remote. So I'm sure we will be revisiting it all throughout.
So before I forget, Jim, when you communicate to the community, just when you said we're remote through this, probably want to highlight that we're starting the remote Monday. Make sure people don't, that we're still in school on Thursday, Friday this week.
Anybody else on this before we move on to the next item on our agenda? And again, Stephen, thank you, really. I mean, it's very difficult, and you, along with everybody else, you're working double, triple, quadruple time to try to make this work. And we appreciate you and wish that we were having a different conversation.
It's okay. We do what we can, best we can for these kids. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Silva, you're up next with Special Olympics Unified Champion School Grant.
Yes, I'm seeking to ask you folks to give approval for the high school to begin to try to develop a unified sport team. In talking with the high school staff who might be interested, we thought track and field might be a good sport to start with because it offers a lot of good opportunity for individual skill improvements, and with the ability to also provide opportunities if you are hybrid or remote or in person. And Special Olympics this year, because they recognize that a lot of the good works that they are doing can't be done in person, had made available to districts to apply for a grant to help support an effort to continue to inspire lifelong athleticism, and also a commitment to trying to partner together and have an inclusive opportunity for athletes of all abilities and learning profiles. So I know the high school is very excited to try to, Kelly's already starting to smile thinking about it. When I asked her if she would be comfortable starting it off, she said a naughty word. I think it was something like, hell yeah, because she was so excited with the thought to have it come to the high school. And I know that Stephen and his staff were also and are also in full support of trying to do that. So we got a $500 grant to try to get that underway. And I know that we thought we would at least try to get some form of a walking club to get going in preparation for a unified track team.
So thanks, Kathy. So what we need is just a vote to accept the grant of 500, and I will continue. I'll work with the AEA to make sure that the stipend. So this 500 will go towards part of the stipend, and we'll cover the rest of it based on how we've set up all of our stipends for activities, etc. So, but first part is to accept the donation.
Excellent. Do we have any questions for Kathy before we make that motion?
Yeah, just a couple. It really, I mean, I think it's a great idea, Kathy. Curious as to sort of how it works with. Is this a sort of competitive team, or is it just something that's in a club kind of set up within Ashland?
It actually can extend beyond Ashland and go to other districts that also have unified teams.
Okay.
But I have to be honest that I kind of always like to start small and grow. So certainly for just this year, we aren't looking to necessarily, advance to competing against other districts. But we are looking to start to pair athletes of all abilities together and try to get them in a nice inclusive partnership for track and field events.
And so then the next question is kind of how does this start to work in this year? I mean, I'm not sure if this becomes a program of the athletic department that we just basically put on ice for at least a couple of weeks, or is it really more of a club? And maybe you can just talk a little bit about how that's going to work.
Right now, it would look more like a club. And so we have a Best Buddies club that is up at the high school. We thought we would actually start to partner with that club a little bit as well to see if we could get some interest grow from that program and club so that we could offer to student athletes that would be considered Special Olympic athletes that opportunity to pair with a partner and begin some practice towards increasing some physical fitness in that track and field realm. So, you know, walking was where we thought we could get some buy-in, and then maybe go a little faster than a slow pace that I might have, and actually do some running, and see if we can grow it to other kind of track and field events. You know, if we have someone who might be interested in something beyond what would be kind of, you know, a running type of activity. So it would be club-like right now this year.
Okay. And presumably something you're doing outside when the weather gets nicer, or starting, if we were back in school in a hybrid model, would you start right then?
I personally think that you can walk anywhere, and we have gorgeous facilities. And quite honestly, if I'm not wrong, Kelly, don't you already have figured out the pathway for doing miles within the high school interior wise? So there's all sorts of opportunity to do it when the weather is not cooperating, or it's a winter, or waiting until the better weather.
So
I think we will focus on outside for right now, since we're not doing anything in the building after school, but
yeah.
we do have that.
Okay. And so my last question is just, Jim, financially, you're fine with the whatever we need to do to supplement the $500 grant?
Absolutely.
We have that. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions, or do we have a motion to accept the gift of $500?
So I'll read the motion that was in the agenda. I move to approve the creation of a new grant-funded unified sports team and approve funding a stipend for the teacher/coach to coordinate activities for the 2020 and 2021 school year.
I'll second.
Then all in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And aye for me. Aaron is absent. Okay, thank you. Student activities, bank reconciliations, July 1, 2020 through September 30, 2020. Is that you, Chris? Who's talking about that?
I can, or Chris can, whatever.
Jim, if you, yeah, either one of us is fine.
Yeah. So again, each year we're required quarterly to approve the school committee to approve the reconciliations of all the student activity bank accounts. This is for the period of July 1, 2020 to September 30th, 2020. They've been through the entire process of being reviewed, and it just is, it's just a formality the school committee is required to do.
Right. And all those details came in our packets, so
Correct.
hopefully everyone had a chance to review them. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I do not.
And if there are no questions, I will take a motion to approve the bank reconciliations of July 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020.
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, Kathy?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And aye for me. Aaron is absent. And next, we have the student advisory update. So
Yep.
Kathy, do you have any warrant approval?
Yes, I do. So you ready for me to read that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Between November 19th, 2020 and December 8th, 2020, I, Kathleen Bates, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $917,090.13. This includes general fund expenses of $481,734.53, revolving expenses of $95,164.98, and grant expenses of $340,157.68, and meals tax expenses of $32.94.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to the minutes. And I don't know if everyone saw, Karen sent the latest minutes through email. So hopefully people had a chance to look at those. We have November 6th. We'll start there. November 6th. Does anybody have anything?
No.
Okay, and then seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the November 6th minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I for me as well. Aaron is absent. November 13th minutes. Does anybody have anything?
If nobody has anything on any of them, do we want to just do them all
We can
together?
do them all. Does anyone have anything on any of them?
There's one thing.
Yeah,
There's
where?
always
I
one thing with
mean,
you.
there was a spelling error, but I can.
Oh, no, I didn't see a spelling error. She had sent updated minutes for November 27th because Aaron Williams was absent, but then in the roll call, she's in there. So we just have to take that part out on
Okay.
November 27th. But no, other than that, no, everything looked fine.
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You're talking about the attendance roll call. Yeah.
The attendance roll call? Yeah. So it shows at the top that she's absent, but then in the attendance roll call, just a mistake,
Yes, yes. She was removed from the
Yeah.
the top, but just not the first roll call for
Right.
the attendance.
Yeah, and then at the end, she's not in the roll call when we,
Right. Just that one.
when we adjourned. Okay. But other than that, no, I'm fine with all the minutes other than November 27th amended.
Yeah, and since you're on, Aaron, I'll just tell you that it's a quick one, but on the November 18th, it's just said MSAC instead of MASC. It's just a spelling thing, and I didn't get a chance to email it to you yet. So anything else on any of those minutes?
No.
So we'll go ahead and take, I'll make a motion, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of November 13th, 2020, November 18th, 2020, November 20th, 2020, November 27th, 2020, as amended.
So moved.
And then a second.
Second.
I'll second. Yeah.
All in favor? Paul?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Aaron is absent. Do we have any gifts and donations this evening?
We do. We have two Planet Aid to miscellaneous gifts and donations for $206.50, and the Plymouth Rock Assurance Company to the Pitaway School Special Education Program of $2,000. So for a total of $2,206.50.
Thank you. And do we have a motion to accept those gifts and donations?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor, Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
An aye for me as well. Aaron is absent. Do we have an assistant superintendent update this evening?
Not today.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And then any member updates?
No.
Anyone?
No.
And Rahim, anything else you want to add from before? I know you filled this in at the beginning. Anything else before we move on?
No, I pretty
You're
much
good?
covered it with the survey.
Thanks,
Awesome,
Ram.
thank you. And action items are the same, and I made the motion earlier to move into executive session, and I'll be looking for a second, and then we'll take a roll call.
Should we
I'll
make-
second.
Should we make the motion, Lori? I mean, I know you read it. I assume you read it at the beginning, but there probably was it a motion that you already made?
I did read it as a motion, but
Okay.
if our attorney thinks I should read it again.
How about, I'll just give it to you. I move to enter executive session under Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or conduct collective bargaining sessions. This would be related to all non-union personnel or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. And Section 3, to conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect, that's where you have to say something on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares not to return to open session. That would relate to the AEA, teacher contract, nurses contract, education support personnel contract, and the Ashland Secretary's contract.
Thank you. And we need a second, please.
Second.
And then a roll call. Mark?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I for me as well. And do you all have that? There's a separate link for another Zoom?
Yes.
Session?
Lori, you do need to make the declaration that you believe it would be detrimental to our position to be talking about this in open session.
I believe it would be detrimental to our position to talk about this in open session.
There you go.
Excellent.
All right.
All right, so thank you,
set.
everybody. I will take a motion to adjourn, or we're moving into
Well,
executive
yeah,
session.
No need.
Yeah,
No need. Sorry.
no
So
need.
thank
All
you,
right.
everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
And
Thanks, Stephen.
see y'all soon.